Impromptu.
Ready? Then I'll begin. A long time ago, in cultures far, far away, there was known a fact. This fact, however, is no longer known in modern society. Today it is a secret, an ancient conspiracy, yet it remains no less true than during the days of creation. Unfortunately, I can't talk about this secret because, well, that's what secrets are. However, what I can talk about, though, is something that I feel very strongly about. Differences and similarities between oak and poplar trees, two of the most misunderstood trees in North America. My first point will be about the many types of wildlife and insects who live in these trees. My second point, on second thought, don't get me wrong, I like trees. I've just come to realize that this topic isn't the most popular. You know, there's a better idea to stick to better topics or branch out, talk about something that leave the audience with information that'll help them grow. So, sorry if you're excited about my tree speech, but in fact, I might just talk about that secret after all. Because, interestingly, through indoctrination, cover-ups, and even the creation of fictional stories to decrease the credibility of it, an astonishing fact is now viewed as but a myth. What was once seen as true is now seen as something childish, something you would find in a storybook, and not reality. But lucky for you and me, this secret shall be exposed. Because today, my speech is on the truth. And the truth is, unicorns exist. This time, I'm not joking. Although this is an entertaining speech category, when I talk about unicorns, I'm always serious. But I know what you're probably thinking. Don't we all know unicorns don't exist? Well, after choosing this topic, I did some pretty serious research. After Wikipedia failed me, I even asked if unicorns existed on Yahoo Answers. I kid you not, the top answer? Yes, unicorns exist in our hearts. Now, ordinarily, I would dismiss such idea just like you did. However, the author of the answer was a, quote, unicorn expert and heart surgeon, so I'm pretty sure that makes him credible on both accounts. But is there any real evidence for the existence of unicorns? Even more surprisingly, there is. 1. Julius Caesar, in his autobiographical work, The Gallic Wars, wrote of spotting a horse-ish animal, an ox shaped like a stag in ancient Germany. But even I was surprised that he went on to say that, quote, from the middle of the forehead, from between the ears, stands forth a single horn, taller and straighter than the horns we know, end quote. That sounds suspiciously like a unicorn. 2. The Book of Beasts. By all account, this is a normal encyclopedic book of all animals originally written in Latin a long time ago. But the most interesting section of this book is found right after the section on the goat and right before the section on the bear. It is a section on, you guessed it, the unicorn. It's on the unicorn. Now, some people say unicorns do exist. They're just fat and they're gray and we call them rhinoceroses. But the translator of this book, Terence Henbury White, specifically adds in the notes that the scholars who wrote about the unicorn, quote, did not intend the true rhinoceros, with which animal they were well acquainted. 3. Dr. Elizabeth Mitchell, writing for the Answers in Genesis organization, mentions 18th century reports from southern Africa describing rock drawings and even eyewitness accounts of, quote, equine or horse-like, one-horned animals. 4. Even Marco Polo saw unicorns in Sumatra. His description is found in the book Marco Polo, The Travels. He put it quite bluntly by saying, quote, they have wild elephants and plenty of unicorns, end quote. Not much else to say about that. 4 sources weren't enough to persuade you, I should also mention the real reason I'm talking about unicorns in the first place. They're in the Bible. In fact, unicorns are mentioned 9 times in the Old Testament, which is more than cows, which are only mentioned 7 times. Job 39:9 says, "Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee?" Isaiah 34:7, "And the unicorns shall come down with them." Deuteronomy 33:17, "His horns are like the horns of unicorns." Exodus 23:22, "God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of a unicorn." And there are more. Numbers 24, Job 39:10, Psalms 22, 29, and 92 all mention unicorns. Now, I should clarify, the actual word unicorn is primarily found in older translations of the Bible, such as the King James Version. Most newer, reader-friendly versions translate the Hebrew word re'im as wild ox, even though translators don't know what a wild ox is. But an article published by the Answers in Genesis organization settles this dispute. It states specifically that scholars have, quote, held to the single-horned understanding of the word. The article concludes stating the King James translators, quote, colored a unicorn because that's what it was. And they trusted the context and the good sense of the readers to know that it was real, end quote. Of course, I should make a disclaimer. These aren't the same animals portrayed in modern culture. I'm pretty sure real unicorns don't have magical powers or a strange affinity for rainbows and friendship. But the idea of unicorns had to come from somewhere, and the evidence actually seems to suggest that it could have come from a real, one-horned, horse-like animal. At this point, you might be convinced. It is possible you all now firmly believe in the existence of unicorns. But it's my guess that you are still slightly skeptical, and that's reasonable considering I have yet to present you with a real live unicorn. At this point, I would love to do that. Fortunately, due to incidents that led to my disqualification at previous tournaments, I've learned the hard way that using live animals as visual aids is strictly prohibited. Long story short, they confiscated my unicorn. I haven't seen Magenta since the first practice tournament. But if that's the case, and we can't see a real unicorn, then what's the moral of the story? Well, there are some situations in life in which we don't have all of the information, and maybe we never will until the day we die. But we still must make a choice. What if I took a grenade out of my pocket, pulled the safety pin, and dropped it to the floor as it started beeping? I don't think you would come closer to inspect it, and I seriously doubt that you would wait to ask for evidence about whether or not it was real. That's because the wise thing to do is assume it is about to explode and act accordingly, run for cover. Of course, we wouldn't know if the grenade were real or not until the beeping stopped, but there are some things which are so important, they are worth believing even when we don't have absolute, tangible proof at our fingertips. The moral of the story is that some situations require a little bit of faith. So am I saying the existence of unicorns is this important? No, definitely not. Unless unicorns are the reason you don't trust in the Bible. Whether or not we believe in God and the sacrifice of the cross is something that has eternal consequence. Our relationship with God is actually a lot like this situation with the grenade. The days of our lives are counting down. We can choose to remain unmoved and skeptical, sitting right on top of a grenade, believing that nothing happens to us when we die. Or we can seek the cover of the cross, knowing that we are immortal souls deserving of eternal fire. Fortunately, as Christians, we know this analogy ends happily, because Jesus, with the greatest personal sacrifice, has shielded us from the fire that we deserve, if only we have faith. I'll get to the comic relief in a moment, but I'll always remember the last words my grandfather told me before he kicked the bucket. He asked me, "How far do you think I can kick this bucket?" Sorry. Don't worry, my grandparents are fine. They're still alive and kicking. Sorry. That was all comic relief, because I realize you might be getting uncomfortable with all my comparisons between God and unicorns. But there is a connection there. The secret in my introduction wasn't just about unicorns. It was about God and Christianity too. Our faith is so often seen as something childish, something we need to grow out of. God is so often wrongly assumed to be an unreasonable obsession or just another character in a crazy fairy tale. But while that's a sad fact, there's something we can take away from all this. If I did bring in a real unicorn, not only would I get disqualified for using a live animal as a visual aid, but I would probably also get docked for lying, fabricating evidence, and abusing a perfectly normal pony by attaching a horn to it. All of this because we so strongly assume real unicorns don't exist. What we can take away from all this is that we can realize that as humans, we're prone to dismiss certain ideas, not because of evidence or even lack thereof, but because they've been labeled as ideas not worth considering. We can see how we do this humorously through unicorns. But the real impact of this is that all too often our culture does this with God. There's so much more to say about this topic, but due to time constraints, I should end here. However, I thank you for listening, and I encourage you to listen to my sequel. You will not believe what I found out about aliens. Thank you.